Along with sound comes music. In 1929, one of the first films featuring sound was a musical. That's right, I'm talking about The Jazz Singer. Widely regarded as the first talkie, this movie is about, well, a jazz singer who struggles with choosing between his career and his family. Is there a reason behind the first talking movie being a musical? When observing the origins of sound in film, we must always consider what was happening in the world during the time. 1929 was also the beginning of the Great Depression, which lasted until just before America joined the Second World War. During this period, people needed something to hope for, and this is where Hollywood stepped in. Through storytelling, they were able to sell a romanticized version of life in America that most people strive to achieve. The studio system capitalized on America's need for optimistic stories, and with the multitude of components that were available to them, audio, visual, design, acting, the work being produced was just that, larger than life. These productions visually were larger than life due to the amazing set designers of the time. They focused much more on making on-screen a space more inhabitable and trying to move away from the theatrical origin. Interestingly, Warner Bros. Came out with 3 musicals during 1933, which would align the company with FDR's New Deal. 42nd Street, Gold Diggers of 1933, and Footlight Parade all signified this alignment and would set a precedent that the movie musicals of the 30s would be focused on the adult world rather than the plight of America's youth. Roosevelt himself commented on Shirley Temple, saying that when the spirit of the people is lower than at any time during this depression, it is a splendid thing that for just 15 cents, an American can go to a movie and look at the smiling face of a baby and forget his troubles. Everyone was using musicals as a means of an escape from the harsh time that was the Great Depression. One prime example of a larger-than-life partnership that emerged during this period was that of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Astaire and Rogers were the dancing partners of the classical Hollywood era. Both dancers had their own careers away from each other, but the highlight of their time on screen was when they danced together. They set a precedent for what is to be expected when watching a movie musical at the time. Musicals gave people a belief in romance and the grandeur of daily life during a time when socioeconomic conditions were not ideal for anyone. So the pure chemistry that Rogers and Astaire had together added to the romantic air in musicals and provided hope to people despite the conditions that they were living under off-screen. Hermes Pan, a choreographer and dancer, worked extremely closely with Fred Astaire during the 1930s. He worked on all of Astaire's pictures with RKO, and the two formed a lifelong friendship built around their love for dance. In an interview, Pan recounts their always harmonious relationship to be in part because of their shared appreciation for jazz. Because of their closeness, Fred Astaire had a lot of sway in what was actually being choreographed, leaving little room for women's input. They had very little input. Most of the time they weren't around. It seemed easier to work things out ahead of time and then call them in later, said by Pan. This was undoubtedly a source of stress between Rogers and Astaire. Pan recalls the studio system days fondly, saying, "We had some of our greatest successes during the Great Depression. People wanted to see white sets and Ginger Rogers in elegant gowns and people in top hats and white ties because they didn't see them in real life. It was an escape. It was strange, but I think people enjoyed dancing then much more than they do today." One of their first films together, Roberta, Rogers and Astaire were second billing under Irene Dunne. The film heavily implies the anxieties of the Great Depression when the business they were working for has financial trouble. This is all fixed though by the end because musicals tended to always end on a higher note than they started. This film is riddled with allusions towards the Depression, like how lyrics in Smoke Gets in Your Eyes are described as conflicted love as a transferred metaphor for crumbling social and national certainties of nostalgia for former days free of doubt, unrest, and precariousness by author Peter William Evans. The dancers could send a dense message like that one through a smokescreen called Hope, which is why their partnership worked so well and for so long during that time. The two accompanied one another in 9 films from 1933 to 1939 before they split off to pursue their own individual careers. That was a successful move, as Rogers a year later won an Oscar for Best Actress in her work in the film Kitty Foyle. Even with that accomplishment, the two dancers are forever remembered as each other's on-screen love and dance partners. Ginger and Fred came together one last time for the Barclays of Broadway in 1949. The importance of their partnership was highlighted splendidly by Barclays because of how it mirrored them in real life. Judy Garland, who was originally on the project, was let go because of her sporadic attendance at rehearsals, resulting in Rogers being brought on. When offered the role by being asked if she opposed the idea, Rogers became angry at the accusation. She reportedly said, "How ungracious to assume I wouldn't want to work with Fred. We had parted as friends and maintained a cordial if distant relationship." Their partnership being rekindled on screen was a big deal, and director Charles Walters understood that very well. Walters wanted to make Barclays a mature epilogue to their legendary on-screen romance. Although there was an excitement buzzing around the set about the dancers coming back together, Astaire was reportedly not as jazzed as everyone else. He complained about them trying to evoke something that couldn't be recaptured, and had some insecurities come up when Rogers was around because he felt threatened. There is a harsh reality to the partnership between these two Hollywood icons. They were really not that close. Hollywood pushed this idea of a match made in heaven, but this match was only on screen, and in the unglamorized world of daily life, the relationship between the two real people with two strong personalities meant they sometimes clashed. Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire were a larger-than-life partnership tailor-made for the time that they worked together in. With a socio-economic disaster that was hurting the country, and the studio system trying to counterbalance that, we were given a perfect on-screen couple dancing their way through all of their troubles. The partners had their differences off-screen, but were successfully a beacon of romantic luxury for people who maybe didn't experience those things in reality.